anyone who says that, we don't need standards, homeopathy is safe, the trust me, I'm a homeopath phrase,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe trust you because you're a homeopath, but, there has to be certain guidelines, there have to be certain standards, there has to be an agreement on what makes a professional homeopath. ECCH is a council of different organizations in Europe, and organizations join because they want to work together to create meaningful standards for the profession on that self-regulatory basis in order that patients have access to homeopathy practice to a high standard.
It's so crucial. I feel that as a practitioner, when you're doing your training, you need to know your medical sciences. When you're talking to fellow colleagues of other professions, you can talk the sort of same language.
There are people who want homeopathy. There are people who want a gentle system. And that doesn't mean that they dismiss conventional medicine out of hand. There's always going to be a time and place where, the option is, medication, antibiotics at the right time, at the right place, but not without examining what else might be available. And the route to developing resilience is really important as well. And I think...
Hi homies, it's Marcus Fernandez here, founder and director of CHE, the Centre for Homeopathic Education. After 5 years of releasing a brand new podcast episode every single week, Eugenie is taking a well-earned break and has kindly asked me to look after the show and spend some time with you all. Over the coming weeks, I'll be bringing you some inspiring conversations with guests from across the homeopathic world and beyond, along with the occasional tasters from our CHE Pro membership library, what many of our members affectionately call the Netflix of homeopathy. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner, a student, or simply someone who loves homeopathy, I hope these episodes leave you informed, inspired, and reminded of the incredible potential of this medicine we all care so deeply about. So thanks for joining me. And now let's get on with today's episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast interview with my special guest, Zofia Dymitr. Zofia has a private homeopathic practice in the UK, and she has an MSc in integrated healthcare and a diploma in supervision. Zofia has contributed to the development of the UK homeopathy profession over 35 years in a range of roles, including 3 terms as chair of the UK Society of Homeopaths, and she's currently chair of the European Central Council of Homeopaths, or ECCH, with a special interest in promoting the development of high standards in the patient interest. Her publications include Economic Evaluations of Homeopathy, a review in the European Journal of Health Economics 2013, and a qualitative investigation of prover's experiences of participation in homeopathic pathogenic trials in the Homeopathy 2020. Zofia is also a member of the British Acupuncture Accreditation Board. Zofia, welcome to today's podcast episode.
Hi, Marcus. Very good to be here.
And Zofia is actually, I'm in the UK, but Zofia is actually on holiday in Perth, in Australia. Is that right, Zofia?
That's right. I have family over here, so I come over here so regularly. And, even before we were used to remote working, I was doing Skype and phone calls with patients.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, like I said, it's like, we could be in the same building. You would never know. You would never know.
Absolutely.
But also, is it winter there now in Australia?
It's winter there, but I will take this winter. Although we had torrential rain today, the roads were flooding for 2 minutes. It's been kind of 20 degrees. It was 25 degrees yesterday.
That's our summer, isn't it? But saying that, Zofia, we've had an amazing summer here. As you know, we're having a heat wave.
I know.
We're on our 7th heat wave. No rain. It's been quite amazing. So Zofia, how I always start these episodes and these interviews is always the same, because I want to know your story, your journey. Everybody's got a story to tell about how they got into homeopathy. So Zofia, how did you get into homeopathy, or how homeopathy got you?
Yeah.
And how did it all start?
Okay, I mean, that's an interesting one because I was living very remotely in the hills of Scotland with a young family and didn't have a career. I was a homemaker and a mum. And because we were living so remotely, I wanted to find out a safe medicine system that I could use at home for the kids. I heard about homeopathy from some friends, and got Dorothy Shepherd's
Mm.
Homeopathy for the First Aider and began looking up remedies. And then my son, at the age of 3, got measles. We were down in London at the time for a short visit, and I took him to a very well-known medical homeopath who practiced in Harley Street. And he kind of looked at this 3-year-old child with measles and said, "Oh, it's measles," and gave him morbillium. Nothing happened. There was my son lying on the sofa, listless, no energy, not responding, not talking, not laughing. This was a very active 3-year-old normally. No change after this morbillium. So I rang Dorothy Hannon, who was the
Mm.
homeopath I'd been introduced to. Don't know if you remember
Yes,
Francis and,
yes, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
Dorothy Hannon
yeah,
in Hexham.
yeah.
And Francis answered the phone and he spent 5, 10 minutes saying, "What's going on with your son? Listless, lying on the sofa, not eating, not drinking, not talking." And he prescribed, guess what? Gelsemium. Within 5 minutes of that Gelsemium, Ewan was sitting up, chatting. He had another dose in an hour. He had something to eat, went to bed, woke up the next morning, as though nothing had happened.
Amazing.
And that opened my eyes very
Mm.
wide. And I then had a later experience with aconite, with a middle of the night cough with my daughter. And at that point, Dorothy was starting the Northern College in
Ah,
Newcastle.
mm.
So I went and I told myself I was only going to do 6 months so I could find more about using remedies at home for the kids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was in 1981.
Wow.
So, yeah, we were the first year to go through the Northern College, and you know, we were all learning. I
Mm.
think, they were learning how to run a college. We were learning about homeopathy. That the enthusiasm saw us through, and
Mm.
we learned a really solid core of how to take a case,
Yeah,
how to differentiate, how to repertorise.
and
And
a
I
good
think
solid
that
training.
saw a lot of us through into practice. Yeah.
So, I mean, many,
So,
many people, don't they? I
mm,
mean, like I said, you talk to a homeopath and everybody's got their own story to tell, but often people
mm,
do get into homeopathy or start to really embrace it through their kids. And often, like I said, it's
yeah,
always the fever in the middle of the night. It's always the middle of the night. It's always the cough. It's the croup.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
and
yeah,
but with kids, you just see it. It's just so quick, and it can be so almost miraculous, can't it?
yeah, it can. And that's why I began, alongside setting up in practice, first of all in Dumfriesshire and then down in Dorchester when I moved south. I always ran using homeopathy at home classes
Yeah,
because I thought it was so important to empower parents to follow their kids through and observe them. Nobody knows your child more than you do.
absolutely.
And that's where you can do the differentiation, when they don't need a remedy
Yeah.
and when they do.
Exactly. And
So,
that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, and I say this because I was the same. I ran many sort of those days, sort of
mm,
we call them mother and baby type talks or mother and child talks, or I
mm,
always ran a remedy
mm,
kit. But I
mm,
truly believe that, and I remember Robin Murphy saying this to me that acute prescribing, home prescribing is one of the highest forms of prescribing you can do.
mm,
Because
mm,
you
mm.
really get to see homeopathy working. Often in acutes, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. But once you empower people, once you get
Yes.
mothers particularly and parents using homeopathy in the home, it's just such a paradigm shift around health and well-being.
Yeah, yeah. And it is that thing of you know your child, so you know
Absolutely.
when to prescribe. And I keep saying you also know not when not to prescribe. So it's not a thing of the child expecting to get a remedy every time
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
that something goes wrong. But it's so empowering to
Yeah.
share that knowledge and experience. And like me, that light bulb moment often takes people into wanting to study
Yeah.
homeopathy.
And I think the more that
Yeah.
and what you said there about trusting, I trust particularly a mother's intuition more than anything about the child. You
Yeah.
know your child more than
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
knows a child. And you can see the shift. And like you said that, but then the art then is learning when to give, when not to give, when to stop, when to repeat. But also, again, it's a paradigm shift, isn't it? I always say it's like a key to a lock. It's like or
Yes.
turning an engine, turning a key. I know most cars are electric these days, but turning the key in the ignition, the engine starts. You don't need
Yeah,
to keep turning the key. The engine's already running,
that's right.
and you just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and when the engine stops, then you can turn the key, or you may not need to turn the key again. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because you don't need to go on repeating the
no,
remedy if there are no symptoms. And
exactly.
that, that first lesson for me was really about individualized prescribing.
Yes.
The standard remedy for measles in whenever it was, 1979, morbillium didn't do a thing.
No.
Gelsemium did.
Yes.
That was the thing that, yeah, that
Yeah, because it
worked. And
fitted the
that's a
individual.
huge learning.
Yeah. Well, because it's
Yeah.
individual and it's again not an
Yes.
allopathic way of looking at it. Allopathic way is one size fits
Yeah.
all. Homeopathic is very
Yeah.
much on the individual.
Yeah, yeah. So that took me into practice, and then I began going to Society of Homeopaths conferences. That was, when there was a huge amount of
Mu-
life and fun and
Oh my,
energy
yeah.
around.
Oh, they were
It's,
huge. The
500
conferences were big
people.
deals, weren't they? They were huge, big deals.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Not to mention the cabarets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Just,
yeah, yeah.
because it was also new and fresh and exciting
Yeah.
then. And,
Well, you're on the wave though, Sophia. We had
yeah,
Tony.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was interviewing Tony Hurley recently, and he
Oh,
was
yeah.
talking about the whole sort of the wave and you had the College
Mm,
of Homeopathy in 77 on this, then the society, and then you had like
mm,
Misha, and then, like I said, in the Northern College. So you were on this wave
mm, mm.
of an uplift, weren't you, with people
Yeah.
wanting to learn homeopathy and be excited by it.
Yeah, yeah. And so then I began to kind of be interested in what was going on with the society's board. And one conference, I think there was a vacancy on the board, and I chatted to Mary Clark, who was the general secretary, and Janet Meldrum, who was on the board at the time, Stephen Gordon, and kind of that was where the kind of fire of the politics of
Mm,
homeopathy attracted me, because I've always run the two things, the reflective, working with people, the listening space, watching
yeah.
people take that shift when in their own time.
Mm,
And then, the politics where there's the challenge and the fire and the difficulties. And, I know to my cost, you put your head above the parapet, you're often heavily criticized for doing that.
yeah.
But I think it's incredibly rewarding nonetheless and inspiring to work with other people who are interested in developing high standards for the profession. And
Yeah.
that was what kept me on the board of the society at a time when, professional conduct standards were being established, the, registration and so on was going on. And it was very, very meaningful with
Mm.
all the energy that was going on at that time. And then Stephen and Andreas Bjorndal and a
Oh,
few
Andreas. Yeah.
others,
Yeah.
yeah, began to talk about setting up a European council that would share common standards. And we owe a huge amount to those people who had the foresight and the vision to
Mm,
start what became European Central Council of Homeopaths in 1990. So
mm.
ECCH has been going a long time now, 36 years.
Yeah, long time.
And yeah, and it is that commitment to developing standards because we want them, not because somebody else tells us that's what we have to have, but looking outside our profession, seeing what other complementary professions do, working
Mm,
out what's right for homeopaths
yes.
in that context. So that because some people think that standards is kind of jumping to someone else's tune, that
Mm,
we're doing something because we're doing it out of fear. And that's not at all how I see it. I see it that we're developing something that has that intrinsic value
yeah.
and meaning to ourselves as healthcare professionals.
Absolutely.
Because,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I just think that, it's so important. We are a profession and we have to have, to me, we have to have standards. And I think our patients and
mm,
clients would like to think that we have standards as a profession
yeah,
that we adhere to.
yeah, yeah. And what's been fascinating is in ECCH, it's taken us years, but 5, 6 years ago, we've introduced on a voluntary basis standards around medical sciences teaching in
Yep.
colleges, standards around CPD, standards around bounds of competence. We've revised our bounds of competence document. And what's really energizing for me is to see people get it, that they
Yeah.
understand, and they work with the material. We've been revising that a document, part of the ECCH portfolio of standards. And when you take a fresh look at something, and new representatives look at it and say, well, why was that clause there?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Oh, we can tweak that word, and we have a new revised version that is meaningful and accepted by our member organizations.
And so,
That's
can
in,
you just say what
yeah,
the aims of ECCH are? Because
yeah,
it's not a, you don't accreditate colleges,
no.
you don't accreditate members. Can you just explain a little bit about it?
Yeah, yeah. So ECCH is a council of different organizations in Europe, and organizations join because they want to work together to create meaningful standards for the profession on that self-regulatory basis in order that patients have access to homeopathy practice to a high standard. So ECCH would like to see homeopathy practice to high standard, accessible to patients right across Europe.
Mm,
And that in Europe at the moment is facing several major challenges because there's a lot of negative stuff going on, anti-homeopathy in Europe. Spain earlier this year revised its own report, internal report that said homeopathy, there's no evidence for it, therefore, it shouldn't be practiced, it shouldn't be available. In Germany, they've removed funding from health insurances for homeopathic medicines and anthroposophic medicines. And that, I have to say that that was rather like the UK. That was part of wider legislation that was making cuts right across healthcare. It
mm,
wasn't just homeopathy. Nonetheless, knowing how beneficial homeopathy and anthroposophic medicine can be and how they've been embedded in Germany as traditional medicines for
mm,
so long, it was deeply shocking to our
mm,
sector when those cuts have come. And in the end, it's not cost effective
mm.
because if those patients don't access homeopathy, then the only thing they can do is go back to the healthcare system that's already overworked and underfunded.
But they can buy the remedies from the pharmacies. They can buy homeopathic remedies
They can
themselves.
buy
Yeah.
them, yeah. It's just that the prescriptions are not no longer, the costs of the
Yes.
remedies are no longer met.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and in Poland, the latest challenge has been that the parliament in Poland has been discussing what's called the Lex Charlatan, which would give the public ombudsman wide-ranging powers to control and fine heavily anyone that they thought was misleading the public by practicing what they call false medicine. And ECCH has a new member association in Poland, and there's been a huge amount of work going on in Poland to organize petitions, to write letters to members of parliament. And ECCH, along with other associations in Europe, wrote to the Polish president very respectfully, requesting that he takes consultation with the organizations of
Mm.
credible practitioners who are not misleading the public but are committed to standards in practice. And so, for anyone who says that, we don't need standards, homeopathy is safe, the trust me, I'm a homeopath phrase,
Yeah.
know, yeah, maybe trust you because you're a homeopath, but there has to be certain guidelines, there have to be
Mm.
certain standards, there has to be an agreement on what makes a professional homeopath. And I guess you understand that,
Yeah.
coming from CHE as much as anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like you're saying, just about the medical sciences, it's so crucial. I feel that as a
Mhm.
practitioner, when you're doing your training, you need to know your medical sciences, not only just for your own
Mm,
benefit, obviously in your own training and
mm,
from a clinical perspective, but also when you're talking to fellow colleagues of other professions, you can talk the sort
mm,
of same language. So I feel it's really imperative that, those standards are met, and you need to understand the body systems, whether it's cardiovascular system,
Yeah.
whatever it is, and
Yep.
how it relates
Mm.
to homeopathy
Mm.
remedies, in clinical practice. I think it's really important. And I think
Mm.
for us, in fact, this is the last time we spoke was around Hungary, where
That's right. Yeah.
our CHE graduates in Hungary are working with the medical homeopaths there, and now are
Mm.
on the same register, aren't they, as
Yeah, they are,
because
and
the
they have.
high standards of CHE training,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
really
And
important step.
yeah, that was really validating to be able to say, to make that contribution from ECCH and say,
Yes,
on a European level, that's what we're interested in.
yes.
And that it was received very positively, I think, by the Hungarian medical
Um,
homeopaths.
Absolutely. And that can be a precedent
Yeah.
then into other countries, I
Yes.
feel,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking along those lines, what we've really noticed in the last 4 or 5 years is that ECCH, which is the Organization for Homeopath Practitioners, and ECH, the European Committee for Homeopathy, which is the organization representing doctors with an additional qualification in homeopathy, we are working much more closely together,
Mm,
which has to be positive because years ago, years and years ago, there was we were holding each other at a bit of arm's length and going,
yeah.
we're practitioners, we're not doctors, we're proud of being practitioners. Or they, some of their members were saying, well, we're doctors, you're not medically qualified,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be practicing. And there are
Mm,
probably voices on both sides saying the same thing,
yeah.
but the fact that we've recognized where our interests lie is promoting homeopathy, meeting those challenges together where we've got common ground
Yes.
and agreeing. We're currently ECCH and ECH are discussing core competencies,
Yes.
which is really fascinating because we're not very far apart at all.
No. No. Well, this is always the case, isn't it? We
Yeah.
have a lot more in common
Yes.
because actually we all,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, well, there's a good expression I once heard about marriage. And I am married, by the way. Is that a successful marriage is not looking at each other's eyes, it's looking in the same direction. And
Yeah.
I think if we're all looking in the same
Yes.
direction,
Yeah.
homeopaths, the professional organizations, if we're all looking in the same way, then it will be a lot better for the profession.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge positive that's come out of the negatives, all these challenges in Spain, Germany, and, none of us saw what has developed very quickly in Poland with
Mm,
this Lex Charlatan.
yeah,
Nobody saw it coming. It came very quickly because of those who are against complementary medicine going, it's all rubbish.
yeah,
And we're able to say, no, it's not rubbish.
no.
We're credible healthcare practitioners
But
and
don't
we're
you think, though,
responsible. Yeah.
Zofia, I don't really believe that. Well, I've certainly saw this since the pandemic, since lockdown, the
Mm,
actual interest and demand from patient has increased. I think
yeah.
people's awareness, obviously the access to
Mm,
information like never before, whether you like it or
mm,
not, social media, the whole thing
mm,
is actually I saw that people have been looking for a much more natural healthcare solution for themselves and their families. I mean, we
mm,
started the conversation with like your situation. It's like when you were, had kids, young kids, you don't want to put drugs into these children. You're looking for a more natural healthcare solution.
mm.
So, how do you think that's impacted the profession?
I think that it's really interesting because, as you say, there are people who want homeopathy. There are people who want a gentle system. And that doesn't mean that they dismiss conventional medicine out of hand. There's always going to be a time and place where, the option is, medication, antibiotics
Yeah,
at the right time, at the right place, but not without examining what else might be available. And the route to developing resilience is really important as well. And I think that language is beginning to creep into European speak in terms of papers and organizations that are looking at how can we reduce healthcare costs. We can do that by helping people, supporting people to be more healthy, healthy
Exactly.
lifestyles, healthy diet.
Yes.
But the third strand of that is healthy medicine,
Yes.
healthy choices in healthcare.
Yeah. Which are free from side effects,
Yeah,
which work with the body,
gentle.
stimulate the body,
Yeah,
gentle, which you
yeah,
can use on the elderly or pregnant, pregnant,
yeah,
women, babies, that can be, yeah, exactly. Actually, I was going to ask you a question before I forget because
yeah.
it keeps going on my mind about your publication on the economic evaluations of homeopathy. So what was that about? Tell me more about
Okay.
that.
That came out of a discussion round the table at an ECCH meeting when Petra Viksveen was chair of ECCH. Petra has gone on to be a university, he's just been made a professor. He works with teenage mental health, I think, at the University of in Norway. He's Norwegian. But he's always been research minded, and we were having a discussion about, what can we say to politicians? And we always say homeopathy is cost effective, it's cheaper medicine. But when Petra and I began looking at the studies that had been done on the cost effectiveness of homeopathy, we found that the studies were early studies and their conclusions were not as valid as they might have been.
Hmm.
So that paper has been examined again, looked at again by someone who gave a couple of papers at the last two HRI
HRI.
conferences. And he has looked at the cost effectiveness of homeopathy and the research that has been done and put some markers in place for if you're going to do research into the cost effectiveness of homeopathy, you need to, like any piece of research, set up the parameters correctly in the beginning.
Hmm.
I'm not an expert researcher,
Hmm.
but I think it's a bit of a weakness that we have in some of the very early studies that claimed cost effectiveness were, had certain weaknesses.
Yeah.
So our conclusion was more research needs to be done, and more research needs to be done with the proper framework. Even if you're doing a retrospective study into cost effectiveness, you still have certain parameters that you need to
Hmm.
establish so that the
Yes.
research is valid.
And solid, yeah, and solid. And
Yeah,
because homeopathy is
yeah, yeah.
used in such, I mean, places like Switzerland is part of their healthcare system,
Yes,
isn't it? Yeah.
yes,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
there's many countries that you could take the data
yeah.
and
And unfortunately, Switzerland, has a member association in ECCH, but Switzerland is not a member of the European Union.
mm,
And European Union countries kind of don't like to be told about what's going on in Switzerland necessarily, because
it's always politics, Sophia. It's always politics, isn't it?
it's all that you can't get away from
You can't
it.
get away from it. So how do you see, I mean, because you talked about education, and I think,
Yeah.
and you said this earlier on, and I do believe the bedrock of the profession
Mm,
has got to be the education of homeopaths.
mm.
So from an ECCH perspective, you mentioned a little bit, like, for example, the medical sciences. What are the core competencies or what else do you think is vital for a homeopathic training?
Yeah, yeah. And I think ECCH and ICH have agreed education guidelines where we say homeopathy education needs to be at bachelor degree level.
Absolutely.
And it needs to include certain subjects, and then it is down to the individual course provider or college to say, we meet those by A, B, C, D in certain ways. So our education guidelines don't stipulate teaching hours as such
No.
or how a college might deliver the course, but we want the college to be able to show how they meet first degree level.
Yeah. And that's at the different levels of, for example, we have level 4, level 5, and level 6
Yeah,
in the, so
yeah,
it's meeting that level
yeah.
on all levels. I think it's quite old-fashioned now, the way that a lot of accreditation organizations ask for hours, because, is it
Mm,
qualitative or is it quantitative?
mm,
It doesn't really, what
mm,
a clinical hour may mean in one place, country, may mean completely something else in another
yeah,
country. What's your
yeah,
thoughts on that?
yeah. That's a difficult one because ECCH doesn't accredit
No,
courses
no.
as such. When I first got involved with ECCH, it did have a courses list, but it wasn't a very valid process. because it was only looking at paper applications and there was no way of actually
Assessment.
validating what was going on. So we agreed accreditation guidelines, but I think what's happened in Germany is a really useful example there, where they have an independent body, used to be called SHZ, it's now merged with another organization, and that organization sets standards for the accreditation of courses, for supervision, training, and that's a really fascinating example of what can happen when you're not opposing each other, when you're not working against each other or saying my system's better than the other, but you have an independent
That's the
organization,
key.
independent of the registers,
And independent of
that
the colleges as
has,
well. It's got to be an
yeah,
independent
yeah,
arm's length
yep, yeah, yeah.
relationship, because and then there's more trust in that from patients, from students, from yeah,
It's a more credible process, and that's what
yeah.
I see in the British. That's just shifted actually, because the British Acupuncture Accreditation Board is now part of the British Acupuncture Council and has become the Education Committee, but the same independent is there. That
Mm,
there's a committee that will look at colleges and review their progress in certain intervals,
yeah.
and that
Again,
that
in an
independent
independent way.
scrutiny is,
Yeah.
and I think that's what I found when I started doing the MSc with UCLan,
Mm,
University of Central Lancashire. It was a bit of a shock because when I did my homeopathy training, we were all enthusiastic, and
mm.
that enthusiasm went a long way. But I think what was missing for me was that criticality
Yes.
and capacity to stand back and analyze. And that's what the MSc did for me. It gave me that capacity to stand back, really review what I was saying. Was it just polemic? Was I just sounding off? Was I just having a rant?
Yeah, yeah.
How did I justify what I was saying, what I was writing about? And I think that's so needed in homeopathy, as well as, the empowering that space, that listening space between you and
Mm.
the patient.
So why do you think it's so important? I mean, why do you think it's so important, the critical thinking aspect as a when you're learning homeopathy?
Yeah, I think it's important all the way through. I mean, I think it's
Mm,
important in practice when,
mm,
you've been in practice 1 year, 2 years, or as long as I have, you can't take anything for granted, because
no.
you're going to miss something that is obvious, because you're repeating that little cycle, your familiar treadmill of looking at a patient, taking a case,
Mm,
having the capacity to look afresh at each patient on an individual basis.
yeah.
And, when sometimes when people are inquiring about supervision, they'll ask me what sort of homeopathy I practice, what method I practice. And I say I treat the patient in front of me.
Exactly. It's patient driven, not methodology driven.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so
Yeah.
true. But and why I say that, because I think actually in society in general, we're losing the ability to critically think. I think people end up, especially again in social media, in these echo chambers when everything's great and the algorithms are just giving you more and more information of how you see the
Mm,
world. And so I think it's not
mm,
just, I mean, obviously it's crucial, I think, for homeopathy and that comes through assessments as well, doesn't it? I think assessments, I don't know how you
sure.
feel, but assessments are important when you have to be assessed during your training, because again, this is when you can develop that critical thinking. You're just not
Yeah.
taking what you've been taught as the gospel truth. You can challenge it. You can,
Yeah, yeah, because I do peer supervision with a colleague, and by talking through a case with her, she can, from that step back place, can say, "Oh, have you thought of it this way? Or have you
mm,
thought of asking the patient about, what their daily life is like?" And I go,
mm,
"Oh my goodness, no, I haven't thought of that," because I'm so much in the loop, especially with a patient you've seen
a
over
long
a number
time.
of years, say,
Yeah.
and there's
And
that
actually,
familiarity.
the process
Mm,
I mean, I do the same with, I have a colleague who I do the same with cases. And through the actual, as you're going through the case, you also are self-reflecting at the same time. And you
mm.
suddenly see things clearly as you're trying to explain about the case, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. So for me to, doing some training and supervision that Sheila Ryan ran with, I think, a psychotherapist called Julie Hewson at our Mill Institute, and I was
Mm.
with a group of counselors and psychotherapists. It was really good to step outside the homeopathy bubble
Yeah.
and, be in a different reflective space
Mm.
and contribute and listen and share and learn and develop.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I think supervision is also really important for homeopaths because
Oh, definitely. Not only during the
we're
training, but also, like you said, once
mm,
you've qualified, we encourage all our graduates to
yeah,
continue on with supervision.
yeah.
I think it's one of
Mm,
the, for CHE particularly, I think it's the jewel in the crown of what we do because it's so crucial that you have that personal one-to-one, like you said, supervision,
mm.
almost like mentor almost, but it's not just about
It's
cases either. It's about
and it's
your own
yeah,
process,
yes.
how things can affect you when you listen to a case or,
Yeah, because I always learn something about myself in supervision,
yeah,
whatever it is that I am not seeing, because like, you can't see looking
no,
sometimes, to use that cliche,
no,
that you that somebody else who's at that remove. In a way, it's what you're saying about that independence, somebody outside your own way of looking, that familiar zone that you're in with your patient, or, the social media bubble that you're in.
yeah.
It's so easy to remain in that closed loop, isn't it?
Absolutely. Oh,
Like,
totally. Now more than
yeah,
ever. I think now more than ever. And
yeah.
it's a bit like we had the conversation actually with Eugenie and Hilary Dorian and Jay Murphy, Robbie Murphy's nephew, and Marco, who developed
Mm.
the
Oh, yeah.
homeopathic software.
Mm.
And we're having a debate about, books versus software.
Hmm.
And the debate was, no, you just need software now, forget the books. And people on the other side were saying, no, the books. But I was saying somewhere in the middle, it's like, I think when you're learning the repertory, this is about repertory, by the way, the repertory, I still feel when you're learning, when you're studying, the book is imperative because it's not just about putting data in and spitting out an answer. What you're doing with the paper, with the real repertory, the book, you're seeing other things there that you wouldn't normally. Oh, look at that over that page. You're seeing things,
Yeah.
and you start to understand the way that the repertory is put together and the organization of the repertory and the repertory speak and the whole thing about it,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
go
That
on,
is
and
that
then go on to the
immersion.
software. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think I read somewhere that, another study's been done on the effect of screens on children, and children in primary schools.
mm,
They're finding that they have less cognitive capacity because of the use of screens,
yeah,
laptops, computers.
yeah,
And, I'm not a technophobe at all, but it's that slow learning that David Orr wrote an essay about, like, years ago, about the time that it takes to assimilate some information, and then what you do with it when you think about it and you revisit it, or you turn the page and you read something else that
yeah.
provokes that further thinking.
Yeah, again,
Yeah,
and it's about that deep thinking. I think what's happened now, that ability to deeply think again is also being lost because everybody's just surface all the time with how they consume information, you
very
know?
short snippets, isn't it?
Snippets,
And
short
it's like,
snippets, but to
yes,
deeply think, people
yeah,
just like people are well, I think there's a bit of
yeah,
a bit of a movement now getting back into reading physical books, but I mean,
yes,
they've done so much
yeah,
research on studies and brain scans before and
yeah,
after and all that sort of stuff. I think
yeah,
and with homeopathy we do deeply think,
yeah,
don't we? It's like
yeah,
we have
yeah,
to deeply think about the patient and how we're going to prescribe, and there is a real, and we have lateral thinking. I mean, there's all different types of thinking that goes on as a homeopath.
yeah. And I think, we often assume that homeopathy is patient-centered, but sometimes it's not as patient-centered as we like to think it is, because what we're doing is projecting either where we're coming from, how we see the world, or the methodology that we're into at the moment, or the latest remedy that we've read about. And that's what we see, and we don't see the patient.
Well, there's a great quote, and
Mm.
that's one of my favorite quotes of all time.
Yeah,
I think it was Goethe, I think it was, I can't remember, but we don't see how things are, we see things as we are.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's so it's just so true, isn't it?
yeah,
If
yeah,
we
yeah,
if we're
yeah.
not in that self-reflective process, really.
And if we're not able as homeopaths to go out into the world and say, these are the cases, I've say I get a bit frustrated when people on social media, homeopaths on social media, say, I've treated lots of patients with Alzheimer's and, completely successfully. And I say, please put together those cases. Because if homeopathy is treating people with Alzheimer's, what the world needs to know.
Absolutely.
But there's something in homeopaths that we're very loath to engage in any sort of research. So
Mm.
during COVID, there was a research project set up, Clinical, very easy. Put your COVID cases into this very simple database. Very, very few cases were submitted.
So why
You
is
know,
that, you
we've
think, Zofia? Why is that?
we've been puzzling over that in and out for a number of years because we've, tried to introduce that, using MyMop,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that
Claire. Yeah. Claire's my mom.
measure your own
Yeah.
outcome, where patients will put together why, what they came with, what happened during the treatment, what the outcome was at a certain interval. And homeopaths don't pick it up.
No.
And, but I don't know if it's because that research mindedness isn't written in at an early stage in colleges.
Mm.
I think some colleges do,
Yeah.
because there's a lot to learn, isn't there, in a short time in homeopathy training. But
But it's, again,
yeah,
it's a way of thinking. That's
it
all it
is a
is.
way of
And it's
thinking.
not as
Yeah.
complicated as people make out. I mean, we used to use
Mm,
my mops actually before lockdown when
hmm.
we were doing physical
All
clinics,
right. Yeah.
and then yeah, I just think again, it's a language thing. People get afraid of it. It's if they've never did
Yes.
sciences,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all that. But
Yeah,
actually, it's quite
something.
simple. It's actually quite simple and actually
It
very,
is.
very useful. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, because Claire Relton used to,
Claire Relton, that's
come
it. Claire, yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
ECCH and say, look, when you're living in a house and there's lightning here and there's thunder over there, all the criticism, all the anti-homeopathy,
Mm,
and yet in our filing cabinets, we've got treasure.
totally,
We pulled
totally
out
treasure.
these cases, did case audit.
Yeah,
I don't do it, I have
yeah,
to say, but, if we did.
yeah.
And that's the other interesting thing, just coming back to ECCH, is that the European Federation of Homeopathy Patient Associations has been working with Stefan Baumgartner on a HOMA project where they want patients to shape homeopathy research.
Wow,
So FPA has been sending out requests for homeopaths to find patients who want to get involved
in research.
in, not in research, but
Oh,
in saying this, the research needs to look like this
right.
to be valid for us, so patients have a voice
Ah, wow,
in
amazing.
shaping the research. So
Yeah,
that's really fascinating.
yeah, amazing. Amazing,
So
Zofia. Well, listen,
yeah,
it's been a great
yeah.
conversation. Thank you so much. And any final words? I mean, how many final words of how you see homeopathy going and the future of homeopathy? Any, because you've been around a long, long time in homeopathy. How do you see the future?
Yeah, I think out of, all the challenges, we have enormous staying power and commitment as homeopaths, and we're not going away.
Mm,
We have that commitment to see homeopathy survive through the challenges and to put a realistic framework in place so that we can remain as a credible healthcare profession. And I just want to read out something that a representative wrote after ECCH had one of our annual face-to-face general meetings, because I think for anyone who thinks the politics of homeopathy is boring, or politics not for me, the she wrote, there's a certain kind of magic in meeting people who share a vision. We share our joys and challenges, and just as we are individuals, we're also united. We come together to create a shared vision for ourselves as homeopaths, for the future of homeopathy, for the importance of having a choice of healthcare, and for the safety of our patients. And she wrote that a couple of years ago, and I come back to
mm,
that because I think, yes, this is why I do it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, what a great, great place to finish. What a great,
yeah,
great thing place to finish. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Zofia. It's been a real pleasure. And just want to thank you on behalf of the homeopathic community of all the years and years that you have contributed to homeopathy. I mean, we met many years ago. It would have
Yeah.
been, I think it was at a society. I think it, were you on core, weren't you? The core when we did core.
Oh, I,
Remember
I
core?
was.
But before that, I
I
think,
do.
yeah. And then 1990, I mean, I was a young chap then. I was a young man.
We
But
were all younger.
we were all younger then, yeah. But I think it was around 98. We used to have the society college meetings. Do you remember? And
Yeah. Yeah,
with Robert would be there. Robert Davison would be
that's
there,
right.
and all
Yeah.
those characters would be around the table. So yeah, I just
Yeah.
want to thank you for all your contribution to homeopathy,
Oh,
because there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that people don't realize in these organizations, like from the
hmm.
society and obviously ECCH, and a lot of it is unpaid paid work as well. But your passion
Yeah.
and commitment to the profession, I know, is amazing. So I just wanted to thank you.
Oh, thank you,
To you.
Marcus.
So
It's been fun
it's
having
been
that
fun. It's been fun.
conversation.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, and yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye.